Okay, let's get things kicked off. 2:02 p.m. PDT. Welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. We've got folks from the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and places like the UK as well. So hello, thank you so much for joining us for Power Up Your Projects with HammerTech and Procore, a webinar today celebrating the launch of a new integration and partnership between Procore, HammerTech, and also with FDC partners. We've got Jason Glover with us, who will let you know a little bit more about his work shortly, and also Ron Babich, who is the CRO of HammerTech here today. So I'm Georgia Burgess. I'm partnerships and partnerships and product marketing lead here at HammerTech, and more importantly, your host for today. So as we're going through the session, please pop in your questions in the Q&A. I'll be keeping a close eye on that, and we'll be taking questions throughout the presentation. So put your hardest, most far-fetched questions in there for Ron, Jason, and myself, and we'll endeavour to answer them in real time. So we're going to explore some trends around productivity, insurance, and tech stacks for construction, general contractors, infrastructure clients of ours, and also owners and safety consultants today. So let's get straight into the introductions. Ron, I'll hand it over to you first off. I know everyone's keen to hear the details, so let's move through. Over to you.
All right. Thank you, Georgia. Thanks for the gracious introduction. And thank you so much for joining us today. This is one of my favorite things to do, is talk about collaboratively in a workshop session where we have open questions and we have shareability between all of us to bring together industry real things that are happening right now combined with product solutions, so that we're not kind of stuck on technology, but we're talking about real things with real results and bringing it all together. So a huge thanks to Jason Glover for joining us today as well too, and Georgia Burgess for being our amazing host today. Just to tell you a little bit about me, I've been in the construction space for almost 20 years now. I'm extremely old, and I've had the good fortune of working on multiple projects in the capital project realm for the most part, and also field service as a co-founder, as a founder of multiple software applications, and I've had the good fortune of being part of that and working with so many great people. So I'm thrilled to be here today, and thank you for allowing me to be part of this presentation. I'll hand it back over to Georgia.
Yeah, so thank you, Ron. Ron also made me adopt this bubble style, but so I'm not quite as old as Ron. I have worked in construction for a very long time, though. I was worked across in the UK and Australia, where I'm born and bred, out of Melbourne, which is the same place that HammerTech was birthed. My background is in infrastructure, so delivering rail projects and large-scale programs like the Olympics and multi-res mixed unit developments over in the UK. I'm now based in Los Angeles, sunny California. Yeah, and absolute pleasure being here, and really excited to get the news out there today of what we've been up to over the last couple of months. Jason, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Georgia. I'm Jason Glover of SDC Partners. We are a software partner and consultancy firm where we specialize in helping clients implement, train, troubleshoot, get creative, all of the above with any kind of project that you might have with your systems. And as you can see, we have a whole gamut of different styles and clients that we've served, everything from owner developers, general contractors, construction managers, and even specialty subcontractors. Ron, next slide, please, and then I can talk a little further about SDC Partners. So we are based out of Canada, Mississauga, Ontario, which is just outside of Toronto for any of you who know. And yes, it is Toronto and not Toronto, just so that you can get the local dialect there. To date, we've been in business for just over 2 years now. And within the last year alone, we served $2.9 billion worth of work. There's quite a lot of infrastructure projects happening, as well as multifamily res, large airport terminal jobs, and just a whole whack of work going on. And it's great to see everyone adopting technology and getting more involved with technology. There just seems to be a lot more success for these projects when they really adopt a full tech stack and really understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and then report on the matrices of exactly what they're producing. We also have been able to notice a 93% uptick in user adoption, which has been great. Anyone from the brand new grad coming right out of school, all the way up to the old 65-year-old superintendent who said he would never touch a phone. So it's been good to see. And myself, similar to Ron and Georgia, I've also had quite a few years of construction under my belt in project management and operations, everything from small family-run companies to national corporations, and then also multinational corporations. So for those Australian folks, I've actually seen and done some work with Australian companies now, so I fully understand what you guys are up to. And at the end of this presentation, I know there's going to be some discussion about how to contact us. For anyone across the pond, be it Australia or the UK, I've got some contacts for you to help you guys out over there as well. Thanks, Ron.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jason. All right, so without any further ado, just getting right into the agenda. So we got a lot to cover and a lot of good statistics today, which, by the way, I will mention now that we're going to talk a lot about some numbers that happen in terms of our industry, our own experience. And so if you're looking for a copy of this presentation, we'll make the link available to you, as well as all the source data too, because I think a lot of this stuff, at least I hope so, for God's sake, or why would you be here? We could take something away that go, I didn't know that. Let me pick that up and let me take that with me so that I can use that in my life. So as we go through this agenda, we'll go through those things, but just going to make note right now that if you're looking for a copy of this at the end, just make the request and we'll make sure you get a copy of the presentation, along with the source data as well too. So we're going to start with finding Project Zen. What does that mean? What does it look like? How do we get there? 2 is really what the tech stack trends look like and what this change has happened in the last like 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 if you're counting, but really in those last few years, how we're thinking about powering up people and operations today, how the connectivity of today really drives those profits and trends that we look at, and what are some of the challenges that we're like looking at to see, and how some leaders in this industry are overcoming those things, as well as a Q&A at the end. And I just will say this as well too, to be a, don't want to get ahead of myself, to kind of stick with things as well too. If you have questions along the way, shoot them out in the, and I think it's text only right now, but shoot those questions out as we go along, because we want to make this casual and interactive, and just make it casual and interactive. So you don't have to wait till the end for questions. Just pop them in as you think about them, if you recall those things. So first and foremost, when the whole point of doing this, as fun as it actually is, the reason why we're doing it, aside from all the fun stuff, is that there is this, there's a zen that we want to get to in terms of projects that puts us in a place where we want to put together just the perfect budget, which it really can't exist, but it's what we shoot for, right? On budget, on schedule, as this perfect Zen project that finishes on time, that finishes under budget, that's made up of a bunch of things. The first one being, hey, if we plan this thing right, it's going to be perfect. If we can just monitor it in the way that we want to get transparency, we can make that happen. If we have really, 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 really good communication within our organization, also outside of organization with our owners, EPCMs, our contractors, everything's going to be amazing. And then lastly, the collaboration itself, just having collaboration and tuned up so that we can make all that happen. And it's so funny, because at the onset you go, well, how hard could it be for this to happen? When you start breaking it down and even those 4 buckets, and you're like, so many things are challenges with us and so many things go wrong that we see the things that get in the way. So starting with kind of trying to break it down into how we can get there and how we make it better. I mean, even if we took at major entities, like on the planning side of estimating and scheduling and ongoing estimating and scheduling as the project's going on, as well as the things that we care about with safety throughout the whole project, and on the planning of the project. Next to that, we have project management for our ongoing project, pre, during, and post, and then finance pre, during, and post. And you just even immediately on the onset, the idea that there's collaboration and everything we talked about in the last slide starts to get a little bit, when you start thinking about it, it starts to get a little challenging within the organization. there's so many of these things, but there's three in particular we're going to talk about today. One is the silos we just mentioned at the beginning. So we have this information that is coming from different systems that doesn't necessarily come together the way that we want to have it come together. The second one is that we do have people, people in our organization, people outside of our organization, and those people have access to specific systems, but they might not have access to every system, right? And all the systems that have that data in it. And that's another kind of roadblocker for us to get to what we need to get to. And then the third one is just this sheer volume of data. When you take the average, project of X and it's got 10,000 plus WBS items, and those WBS items have XYZ underneath of those things, it's a lot of data per project. Not only the projects that are going on, but if you think about it, multiply it historically, it's just a lot for us to kind of get through. So when you start to break it all down, and not to be doom and gloom, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of impact things that happen on average, right, because of it. And so long-term, this number hasn't changed very much, speaking of age and getting old, in the last even 15 years. But on the average, or for our average schedule overruns, we're always right about 20%, right? It hasn't changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years from that number. Today in 2021, not maybe specifically today, but definitely this year, 47%, and this is enterprise accounts, are still relying on paper and spreadsheets for safety in the enterprise in North America. I mean, that's just a huge number when you think about it. 43% visibility impact in terms of not being the transparent information data that we're expecting to get. And then the last one, and this is another one of those 15-year numbers that just doesn't change. It's just absolutely amazing. But 32% of excessive insurance premiums, ranging from 32 to even 50% of, because of the data that we're not getting out of our systems that could help us reduce our insurance costs and reduce our insurance premiums just by having the information, and that we can manage our risk much better. So how do we fix that stuff? So the idea that between Procore and HammerTech coming together, and HammerTech taking a different view in the stack now, when we think about, I don't want to say the olden days, but you think about safety being always important, but always put at this level that's like third or fourth down of everything else. Now, in the last 4 or 5 years, what we see, especially on the enterprise side, is our safety is part of that stack in an equal measure that estimating and schedule is, as safety is, as project management and finance, with Procore kind of over the top of that, as well as centralized data reporting with data warehousing. And this data that we have, this impact of how that data gets across, not staying just in that safety silo anymore, like we saw in the beginning, but spreading itself out so that the information about delays has an impact on the schedule that we can actually identify now, that helps us with risk, helps us on the project management side, helps us understand, helps tell our CFO, hey, this might be late because this happened and it's going to have this kind of cost impact. So now we're not just talking about safety data, because it's extremely important, but now we're talking about the outcome of that data that helps us with those other different modules. And I'm just going to take a breath for a second and kick it over to Jason, and maybe Jason can put some 2 cents in worth on that as well too.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Procore is more and more, as much as the software, becoming a platform. And in becoming a platform, like you see, it's able to sort of take all of those silos that Ron had mentioned earlier on and really sort of funnel them into a centralized area, a database, a platform, a system. And from there, you've now got the ability to sort of look at your data from a different perspective. You can blend it, manipulate it, massage it how you need to make it work for your reporting. And as part of that, now Procore, with their analytics tool, also allows heavy reporting through business intelligence, which is obviously the way that the industry is tending to go. And through that, you can now actually track, like, what are my KPIs in safety that I'm using through HammerTech, and how does that actually affect my bottom line? So really, HammerTech partnering here with Procore, it's a slam dunk. It's a great sort of augmentation to both platforms. And I'm really excited to be part of this with you guys. Thanks, Ron.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. So what's the approach? I know some people are just on the edge of their seats with so much excitement of, how is this HammerTech thing actually working with Procore? So let me get you from your excitement to reality, and let's actually look at that and see what it actually is. So with HammerTech, if you're not familiar with it, if it's the first time you're seeing it, HammerTech took this enterprise approach that, instead of looking at, hey, let's get 6 different point solutions, which is another problem that's arisen in the last 5 or 6 years, let's take an enterprise approach to the platform that extends itself across everything that's needed, right? And then do this nice collaboration with Procore. It gives us the ability with a standalone platform that addresses our personnel management, our licensing, our certification, our safety plans, our JHAs, our permits, our equipment monitoring, the whole enchilada. Instead of breaking it down into like 5 or 6 different point solutions, you can go in one place, which I'll show you here in a second, how that works, and get it all done. The beauty of that is that we carry that over to the worker out and the subcontractor that's out in the field. So if you think about what we just said a second ago, and you said, okay, what if I put all that in context to where the worker and the subcontractor at the center of all of this has the information in the field, the same information that I could get in the office, no 3-ring binders, just all digitized, all at my fingertips, and just walking onto a job site and having the information follow me so that I don't necessarily have to have all even the right questions. I know because it's been assigned to me that because I have this work, these are the licenses for it. These are the JHIs attached. These are the meetings that were attached to this thing. This is all of the information that now I'm going to get from that worker, which is also going to show up on the daily report along with all the other stuff that's going to go on in this bi-directional manner that combines all this stuff together. So now we moved, instead of this silo approach, to automating this process of collaboration and unity and bringing all the data together. It's just the complete opposite of the opening slides that we went through, which is the problem that we were trying to solve. That's how that works. So how does it really work? How does it, that's the $1 million question. Probably the $200,000 question, but how does it really work, right? So from a Procore perspective, Procore is taking the project information and pushing it over to HammerTech. So super cool about that is now, instead of, again, swivel chair management, if I've got projects that are in Procore, I've got projects that are in HammerTech. How does it work on the labor hour side? Well, it's pretty cool that way as well too. So from a labor hours perspective, we take the HammerTech hours that are very detailed at a subcontractor level and an employer self-perform level, and we're pushing those things into Procore. So, and those things are happening in real time in that integration. The third thing that's happening, and this is bi-directional, is that when we have vendor and subcontractor information at that level, that's going in a bi-directional manner. So we've got things going in both directions. And we're going to get into that in the weeds here in just a second, and I'll break it down for you as to what the detail looks like. The benefits of that is threefold. Again, we were talking about, things are fun to do, but really why would you do this? Well, at the end of the day, we get 51% or better faster start times because we're getting, you remember that we were talking about the worker and getting the worker started really quickly. Workers start 51% or better on timing just by getting that data in their hands. It's just a huge thing. It is on scheduling delays, on cost and everything else. Just that alone is a big deal. The second part is, because we have this integrated data now, we're not doing swivel chair management, we're not entering the data twice, and obviously that's a big factor, and we get 43% less data errors because of that. And then just one of the big home runs that we know we haven't leveraged everywhere is just this reduction in insurance premiums, because this insight into risk management now at a microscopic level gives us the ability to address insurance premiums like we never have before. And it's something like you've never seen before. So here's how we do it. So number one, faster orientations get us that 51% I was just talking about. Big deal. It's a big check mark for us in terms of like getting the workers starting on time, big impacts across the board. And it's something that just doesn't happen anywhere else. The second one is this automation. We were talking about like, oh, geez, people who have access and how that system works from crossing over to crossing over. Well, instead of making it a manual process, if we automate the system of daily reports so that all that activity that takes place just magically shows up on the daily report, it's a big problem solved for us. So that's number two. Number three is automatic daily field records, so that all of the activity that gets entered automatically gets put into that log, right? So we're not having to double enter and type things and remember and pencil whip things on Friday or remember what we did, as they say. We're getting that stuff all automated inside the system, all automatically. And a real big one is, cash flow. So what's the end result of that? And again, who cares? Well, you should care, because from that perspective, we're speeding up the whole invoice processing, and it's less data errors, up to 43%, but it's also increasing our ability to get cash flow faster because we're making less mistakes, and we're also speeding up the invoice processing perspective. Next is really looking at the risk data, which I can't really talk enough about, but it's so extensive on the insurance side, reducing insurance costs by 15 to 32%. Understanding our subcontractor risk, who's at a higher risk than another subcontractor, making our subcontractor selections. That whole process just gets better, and it helps our company much better in terms of our overall cost and our overall project profits. With that, I am going to, because I did my extensive 6-minute discussion again, I'm going to flip it over back to Jason. Jason's going to talk a little bit about meaningful data between Procore and HammerTech.
Yeah, so basically what happened was HammerTech, when they were building out the integration, they talked to their clients that were using both HammerTech and Procore and kind of said, what would be your turn-in type functions right now that are your biggest pain points? Where would be your biggest value add for us to get this out quicker and into the hands of the clients so that you can actually enjoy using this integration and make sure that it's starting to work for you, as I'm sure other things will then be built out in the future. So obviously some key things for the data sync, you want your project name, all the serial identifiers, time zone, site information, just anything sort of high level that brings it in so you're not having to duplicate the same project from Procore into HammerTech. You can, okay, perfect. And then the vendor data sync. So same thing, Procore does a really good job of sort of organizing your vendors, keeping all of your user data in one place. So now what you can do, you can just simply go back and forth, whether you're inputting that data in HammerTech first or inputting it in Procore first. The two systems are going to start talking to each other as soon as you've synced them, and make sure that everything's synced up, make sure that everything's sort of the single source of truth going across both systems so that you're not worrying, oh, did I add this guy in Procore but not HammerTech or vice versa. So it just makes everything a lot more streamlined from that perspective. And then the field worker data sync. So, I mean, this is going to be huge. How often do superintendents complain about running around the job site trying to count how many minutes certain trade has, or even the foreman for a major subcontractor saying, unless I do an hourly report from the union hall as an example, he's not 100% sure how many guys he may have on any given day. So this worker count is just going to make things a lot better, tallying those hours. And again, it goes back to that single source of truth. You no longer have to worry about, is there a scrap of paper in someone's pocket that didn't get captured in the day? Pieces like that, you're just going to have more confidence in the data that's actually coming into Procore from HammerTech, because it's just going to be more accurate and more up to date. And the syncing of it just makes it a lot cleaner, and everyone's going to really enjoy that, I think.
Awesome. 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 Thanks, Jason. So if we could, I just wanted to take a minute and talk about almost like the bottom of the bun of the sandwich. When you look at, this does not look like a sandwich. You could if you're in a really weird part of the country. But when you look at data centralization and data warehousing, the fact of the matter is that it is part of that Zen at the beginning of the conversation. It's also part of that platform overview of, rather than having like 10,000 point solution, if we're platform focused and we're centralizing the data, then whether we're at the exec level, our PMO office level, our field level, whatever level that happens to be, we can have different lenses, different views. Being a 5-minute exec on a daily basis and being able to see and identify what are the things that are important to me from everywhere in the organization as well too. So one of the approaches that we took was we went very strong in the Power BI approach, because it's such a standard, especially now. And speaking of Zen, just that conversation alone is probably a week discussion in terms of the data warehouse and the analytics on Power BI. But at the end of the day, is what we decided to do was go the Power BI route strongly so that we can push that data to Power BI, bring it together with other data from all other systems out there as well too, like Procore, like the ERP system, even scheduling and estimating, so that everything's come together in one place. And then we can leverage those things and get visibility to the right people with different views. So here's a couple of things, like you see the LTI rate, the MTI rate, you see benchmarks for what they should be, what we're expecting them to be, what they actually are, and they're dynamic, they're changing as they're happening, and they're customizable. The great thing about this is, with Power BI is you can configure it to be just about anything you want them to be and get the statistics that we want. So here's another example. Average days to resolve, total number of incidents, completed inspections, things that we can actually take action on, things that we can make decisions on to make better decisions within the organization to help reduce cost, to help reduce impacted scheduling issues, all of those things, and help with our insurance as well too, getting to that point as well too. Inside, I thought I'd take 1 second just to kind of show you, open the door really quick on the HammerTech side, aside from Power BI. And when we look at the left-hand side of that menu, you probably have a big, 3-ring binder that represents every one of those things that you see. There's probably a permits one, there's a bulletins one, there's equipment. So HammerTech, the approach we took there was like, if we could just digitize that and replace all of that paper out in the field, and you had a centralized place to go to, manage it, and create all of the things we need to do in the workflow process, what would that look like? And so that's what we've done. So just to give you an inside view of what that looks like across the inside HammerTech dashboard, that's what that is. And then we've taken also this kind of simplistic approach where, regardless of whether I walk up with an app or I walk up with a Motorola phone from 1996, whatever you got going with you, it doesn't matter to us. We have the most flexible way to get on a job site on the universe, with an app, without the app, with a Motorola phone from 1996. It doesn't matter what you got, we can get you on the job site quickly. And when you're managing 1,000, 2,000 subcontractors, yada yada, that's the thing that kind of ties right into place, that kind of separates us from the pack, is getting and empowering that workforce that that's on the field for that. So it's a big deal. So speaking of big deals and the bottom of the bun, and again, why should I put any energy into this whatsoever? But one example I do like to use is, like, if you think about even your average, or I say average, but average $300 million project, with literally like an average 3% million dollar pre-tax margin, the slightest improvement with productivity, whether it's the collaboration side, the transparency side, the visibility into risk, the schedule delay, you could take all the big numbers that we shared with all the stats and just take 5% of those. Because the margins, as we know, are so small, that margin's so tiny, that 5% impact has a 17% marginal impact, which has a 1.5 million reason impact why you should take this stuff seriously. So small things make these big differences, and we see real impacts on real projects that make real big differences. And it's just interesting when you really look at the numbers and you really fill it out and go, why wouldn't we do collaborative thinking? Why wouldn't we bring a platform kind of sensibility to what we're doing in our projects? So that's it. So I hope that that all makes sense. It's always amazing when you throw 10,000 numbers on one screen and then you hope it makes sense. But at the end of the day, big results for little differences that make big differences. So with that, I would like to open it up. We're doing pretty good on time here, 27 minutes or something like that after the hour. Open it up to questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a couple that have come through, but I encourage everyone, if you've got a burning question, please send it through now, and so we can have a discussion about it and get you the answers that you're looking for. So Ron and Jason, we can answer these as they come through between us. The first question is, are there plans to add additional, is there a roadmap for the integration? Are there additional plans to push data points across? I'm happy to take that one from the product side of things, and then Jason and Ron, if there's pieces that you want to add, please feel free. So the way that things work at HammerTech, and I know Procore are very similar, is that our approach to development is very much driven by the market. So it's what are the problems that we aren't yet solving that we need to for our clients, and also the market that's out there across the regions that we operate in. And so we've got about 10, nearly moving sort of very closely up to about 15 clients on board who are actually using the HammerTech Procore integration. And so they will be a key part of us understanding how it's going and really what are the additional areas that they need in order to further drive the areas that we've been speaking about today. So reducing duplication, getting information to the right people to really make those time, cost, risk impacts. And so we'll be running a workshop later this year, probably a couple of them again across the regions, and then that will determine the roadmap, and that will be done with Procore as well. So the team out in Australia and here to determine what that looks like.
Awesome.
Ron or Jason, anything to add to that?
No, that's great. I mean, Procore, as you know, has the open API, so it's almost endless what you can eventually tie into the system. But like you said, Georgia, it's a matter of what's the market need, what are the clients going to be looking for, and then that's where the focus will obviously entail.
Fantastic. And then we've had a question come through saying, what's the benefit of having both systems? So I'm happy to contribute to this for a little bit of context. So I think we've had a couple of questions when we've been talking to people saying, well, there's overlap between Procore and HammerTech. So there's incident functionality, observation, inspection functionality in Procore. That's fantastic. You can still continue using that. In as much as it's also in HammerTech. And so the purpose of this integration isn't to say you have to move XYZ over to HammerTech or to Procore, but it's giving you the options to say, how are you going to get the best information from the field in order to serve the various departments and, I guess, detailed information needs that you have. And so if I give a sort of specific example there, so if you've got subcontractor performance as a key piece that you want to look at, and so you've got a lot of the financial information, contract performance sitting in Procore around RFIs, around payments, things like that. If you've got HammerTech sitting alongside it, you get a really detailed picture of what's actually happening on site. You can confirm the workers that are or aren't on site to help with progress payments. In the instance that they've been on previous projects, you can incorporate that information into your procurement processes in advance to ensure that, have you allowed for certain cost risks in your schedule and estimate. So it's getting the additional information from the field as is helpful to your team to be able to, augment, as you said, Jason, augment what you've already got in Procore.
Yeah, and additionally, you could almost use it as, we don't necessarily want to talk silos, but if you wanted to sort of keep your permissions clean with, let's say, external parties like your subbies and vendors using HammerTech, and then Procore gets used for your internal stuff, you can also look at it from that perspective and kind of say, okay, we're giving them the use of HammerTech, but we're not going to give them quality and safety through Procore. There's different ways that you can kind of look at that. So it actually gives you more control and more power. You get to get more creative. And then, as Georgia mentioned, it makes the commercial responsibilities at the end of the day so much cleaner, because now you've got better reporting to kind of say exactly, has everybody provided X, Y, and Z? Can we release payment? It really is a win-win, especially if you already have both systems going at the same time.
Fantastic. So the next question is, how much does this cost if I already have HammerTech and Procore? So the answer to that is it's free because, as Jason said, there's already an open API from the HammerTech side of things as well as the Procore side of things. So it can be set up really easily. I might just take a second to talk about how you actually go and get this set up. So people are probably asking, how do I download it? Or how do I access it? So if you're an existing client of HammerTech, the first person that you go and contact about this is your customer service rep, either in Australia or in North America or New Zealand, and they will walk you through the API integration process. And if you are a new client of HammerTech, we can talk about that as a part of the onboarding process. And similarly, if you are a Procore user that's not yet a HammerTech user and haven't spoken to us yet, please feel free to reach out to us via our website, or Ron and Jason are going to put their details up shortly at the end. Let me see if I've got another that's come through. I do. So the question is the data shared between HammerTech and Procore customizable or configurable to be able to change? So I can answer that one. I spoke to our team in advance of this. So the first port of call that that we recommend is really focusing on the vendors and project information as a first port of call, because it really feeds the remainder of the existing integration and then any changes that happen down the line. So starting there, some of the options include the ability to associate vendors to Procore from HammerTech and vice versa. And hours, again, you have a numerous number of options around being able to send information across, whether it's via, only once it's approved in HammerTech by a superintendent, or you can, push it through automatically. So there's options about how you send data through, and also you can send less. I think there's a couple of optional points from the previous slides that we spoke about. And then we will, be looking at further points as mentioned earlier from a workshop standpoint. Jason or Ron, anything else on that from you?
No, I think that was perfect.
Awesome. And I think they are the last questions that we have. Was there anything else that you and or Jason wanted to add to the conversation?
There's one question.
Just before we wrap that up. Yeah, there is a question in the chat, actually. And I think it's more specific to HammerTech, and it says, do you have plans to explore business in Africa?
Yeah, I will say, HammerTech's a global company. We do business around the world. We have some awesome projects that are going up right now in Europe and in different parts of Asia as well too. So yeah, absolutely. If you have something in mind, do me a favor, hit me up after the workshop, and love to talk about it as well too. Thank you.
Ron, was there anything else from you? Thanks for picking up on that one, Jason.
No, as far as questions go, I just want to say once again, as far as like the data that we share and the interest, I was super excited we had just a great turnout today, and we want to do more of these industry focused. I will say that because I forgot to mention it. We do want to do more industry focused workshops, and we will be doing them on a regular basis, at least monthly now. And maybe the schedule might get bumped up where we do a couple of them every month, but at least once a month, picking a new topic, whether it's like we did today from a silo perspective or another perspective. But if you have some feedback on something you'd like to see in the future, I'd love to hear your feedback on that as well too. That for new focus, please cover that, cover this, cover X, Y, Z, or don't cover anything. Just let us know what you want us to cover or not cover, and we're happy to do that.
Amazing. We do have a couple more questions that have come through, so I'd love to answer them if we've both got time. So,
yes.
So is the integration up and running for any general contractors? So yes, it is. The general contractors that we've got it up and running for are Davis Construction in the US, as well as Gray Construction. And then we have another couple that are back out in Australia as well. I believe it is Build. Let me just get I'll come back to it. But yeah, we have, I think there's about 6 that are out in Australia. So we've got about 10 total, and then we've got about 6 in the works at the moment. I'm happy to share the details there as well. What we found is really helpful is clients often speak to one another in advance of setting up an integration, just to understand what their process has been and how they're using it, because each of them is using it slightly differently to suit their own processes and systems. And we've also got Jason on the line here who can help you navigate that integration process as well from a Procore side of things. And then the other one was, how long does it take to get the integration up and running? So on that sort of side of things, if you are an existing client of HammerTech, there is a data mapping process that we undertake with you. We've got a tool that helps you speed up that process at the moment. So this is to make sure that the projects in HammerTech, vendors in HammerTech as well, align with the projects and vendors that you've got in Procore that you want to map to. And so it can take sort of about 2 to 3 weeks, really depending on how long the mapping process takes. But we've got that pretty down pat at the moment, and our customer success reps are really, ready and available to help you out should you choose to turn that one on. Anything else from you two on those?
No.
No. The only thing I would maybe add as well was that in part of that sort of implementation, it kind of depends on what you're looking to do too. Having the 2 systems integrated, that gives you a little bit more flexibility as well in terms of like your local and regional requirements. You can really dial into the details, especially if you've got specific certifications that you're adhering to. And then, yeah, it just makes it that much easier. But the implementation, when you include those kind of things, could take a little bit longer. But again, I find a lot of times too, it always is sort of a top-down model. Once the executive leadership team is bought in, it's off to the races, and you just kind of make sure that you get the plan and the action, and then you move forward. So it's like Georgia mentioned, it's not painful at all. It's just a matter of making sure you've dotted all your T's, crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's.
Fantastic. Jason, I've got a question for you. I would love to understand a little bit more about your process of actually establishing a brief and working with your clients when you're setting them up. Could you take us through a sort of a 10,000-foot view of what that looks like?
Sure. So there's basically two buckets of clients. There's the clients who already have the software in hand and they just want to use it better. So from there, it's kind of like I do a deep dive on a couple of their projects once they've provided me access, take a look at how they're using the system, and then start making recommendations on how they can actually gain more return on their investment through the system. A lot of clients I find they use the system, some of them use it incorrectly. Other times when they're using the system, they're just not gaining the full value because they aren't aware of certain things that you can do in the system that really provide you some additional visibility to the ongoing issues on your site.
Oh, we've lost him.
He could be amazed right now.
I think it'll come back.
Yeah, he will.
He
will come back.
Clients.
We just lost you for a very brief second there. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So then the other time is when there's the clients that don't have the software, or they're looking to implement it by transitioning from another software over, or even from Excel and Word over. At that point, we kind of do a more deep dive into the business's operations, see sort of what is going on, what works, what doesn't work, how can the software help, what is going to be the best software to help you, and then we develop a plan alongside with our clients for that.
Fantastic. And how long does your process typically take for getting them up and running for either of those circumstances?
So getting them up and running, again, kind of also depends on the ask, but if the company already has the software systems, it's a lot quicker because obviously they already have it. It's just a matter of sort of making a new sandbox, trialing the things, making sure that the company likes what's going on, and then start launching them into the projects and training to get that all done. So that's a lot quicker. That can be around 3 months, I would say, to get the entire organization up to speed with the new ways of doing their business. And then with actually piloting and trialing and moving over to a new system, that takes a little bit longer, basically because the subject matter experts, they're all over the place, they're busy. You kind of need to focus on different aspects. So it's more of a phased approach from that standpoint, where you might focus on financials first, then project management systems, quality and safety, and it's flexible. You can kind of go whichever way you want to look at it. If drawings out of Procore are the first thing that you want to get going so you can do your R5s and your submittals, so be it. We then run into that and make sure that that gets all trained up so that everybody's running right out of the gate.
Fantastic, thank you. Another question, so if we're an existing customer of both applications, so both HammerTech and Procore, is there a way to turn it on at project level so we can test it before turning it on for all projects? The answer to that is yes. So you can select which projects you want to test it on. Some of our clients out in Australia elected to do that first, just to make sure that they understood and could iron out any alignment with their existing processes. And so, yeah, they've done that and ran that for a couple of weeks. And then after that, rolled it out with a really great communications plan with their team to make sure that their teams were ready to actually use the information from both systems.
Yeah, and the advantage there is also using the sandbox so that if you do make a mistake, you haven't affected any live data on any projects. So having that ability is a great feature for these innovations.
Fantastic. And I got one last one direct to me, which was talking about from a governance standpoint. So if you're looking at wanting to leverage both of these systems to be able to meet workplace health and safety agencies, so for example, OSHA in the US, how do these systems help you actually do that? I guess if we're comparing it to an alternative paper and pen or spreadsheets or any sort of other amalgamated system. Jason, do you want to take that from a Procore standpoint as a first port, and then I can build there?
Sure. So it makes finding stuff a lot quicker. If you think about how many inductions you might do on any given day and then multiply that by the length of the project, if there was an incident, there could be something like one of the ministry or OSHA or somebody shows up and they're looking for specific information on who is this person, were they trained, what are their credentials, just anything that applied to the situation. And I mean, emotions are running high. Everybody's running around trying to get these answers. If you have one place to go to literally do a search and find that information right at your fingertips, it just brings a level of calmness back into everybody's life at that moment. And it just helps kind of get the answers over to those authorities having jurisdiction, making sure that they're satisfied. They see how organized you are. They start to realize, okay, this might have been a complete accident. And now we can start looking at the actual details to investigate why.
Yeah, fantastic. And couldn't agree more with what you've just said there. I think the other part of it is the preventative side as well. So it's looking and saying, okay, you know, if there's certain requirements like undertaking weekly inspections like OSHA requires, or you have your own KPIs to actually keep out in advance of a reason that an authority might need to come and visit your site, is being able to have that visibility in advance to see, you know, which teams are well ahead, which teams might need some additional support in those areas, to be able to prevent instances where you're having to have unnecessary engagement. And like you said, having all that information at the tip of your finger. Another part of that is we've developed template reports so that you can actually export out all the information that you need specifically for OSHA style audits. Similarly, we've done that in Australia just to make sure, again, that that information is in the format that that team member may need. As you know, as soon as it happens, so you can focus on the issue at hand rather than paperwork. Okay, I've got another couple that have come through. So can one of you talk a little bit more about insurance premium reductions? Do any insurance companies require the systems? So Ron and or Jason, I'll hand it to you for that question. We can pick up on anything else.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I mentioned, because everything, there's so much variability for all of that. So the thing that I'll mention would be that it's access to the data and the ability to report on the data, not only just from the as things are happening and a historic perspective, so that you can pull out and filter and get to the data that will help bring insurance premiums to a lower level. But the other part of this is just the risk assessment prior to the project as to which subcontractors do I have a better chance of being successful with that could actually help keep my premiums reduced, because that subcontractor is actually operating at a lower risk. So there's so much decision making that can be made, both pre-project as well as during the project, and both of those have a significant implementation on the decision process. So it's kind of a broad stroke answer to a broad stroke question, but that's the reality. Yeah, it really is the risk assessment there, like you mentioned, Ron. Taking a look at your contractors that you've worked with before and sort of gaining the historical data to see how do they perform job after job, and that's where it really can help with your insurance premiums. Awesome.
Yeah, and so the other two things that I'd like to add to that is, one, I know that Procore has a partnership with, I believe it's Gallagher or another major insurance agency over here, and whereby if you're actually using the Procore system, you do get favorable rates because you can give them that certainty that you're managing your project in a certain way. And you can certainly do the same with the likes of a HammerTech. We do have instances where we have major clients. So for example, an owner client of ours chooses to use HammerTech specifically for that reason, so that they can know that where they have an OSIP arrangement, so an owner controlled insurance arrangement, that they are not going to put themselves where they're, you know, unable to see if they're in breach of their insurance requirements. So it's also covering it from that side of things too. So the next question is that we're a Procore customer, not a HammerTech customer. Can you talk a little bit about how you manage trade workers? We're looking for something to help us out. And I think it's sort of a two-part question. So managing trade workers, and then also especially around COVID tracking. So Procore customer, not HammerTech. So, okay, I can turn my hand to this, and Jason, you know the system as well. So I'd love some insight from you on how Procore is helping there. So as Ron mentioned in his presentation, so a major part of HammerTech's ethos is ensuring that from the get-go, you are inducting the worker. So you know who's on your site and you know which projects they've been on. And so because of that, you have full visibility of who's on your site in real time and where they've been and also who they've interacted with. So in the HammerTech system, you can actually see that sign in, sign out information live, also in daily reports. And then we've got an additional layer on top of that in Power BI that allows you to do a number of things. So one, in terms of managing trade partners, what licenses and certifications do all of your workforce have. We've got a workforce matrix in there so that you can see, you know, are there already expired or nearing expiring licenses, and we need to follow up with those teams so that they can book in their training, so that when we need to use the forklift on a new project next week, we know that we're going to have someone in the team who can undertake the pre-start inspections and actually use that piece of equipment. So that's a very detailed but quick answer of an example of how HammerTech helps you see your workforce and connects them to all of the field processes so that you can be proactive. The other side of things is also from a COVID standpoint, the information from HammerTech pushes out to Power BI from our sign-in app. And so you're able to do a couple of things. So one, you're able to see exactly who was on site in relation to other people on site based on the location of where they said they were at when they're checking in and working for the day versus where they check out. So you can determine exposure potential. And so that can help you in a number of ways. So one, you know, if a worker wasn't in an area with another worker throughout that day, you can sort of really focus in on certain teams to be able to do your personnel tracing based on the exposure level, so you can get to the root cause as quickly as possible. The other thing is that you may only have to shut down a portion of your site as opposed to a whole site if you can really demonstrate that there was, you know, the site was split and managed separately. So if, you know, if I know particularly in the instance of the COVID situation and how it's panning out in Australia at the moment, particularly New South Wales and Victoria, really trying to manage the risk of site shutdowns is incredibly important. And so if you can, you know, manage a work site in split halves, as an example, and have a system that can help you demonstrate that in the instance of an outbreak, you may not have your entire site shut down, but you can potentially, you know, keep continuing with a portion of it. And so that's really helpful on that sort of side of things. In addition to that, we also are able to flag workers. So if there's been an instance where a worker has been on a job that had an exposure on it, you can get notified when they go and try and sign into another project. Again, it's this, you know, you might not be preventing them from getting to site, but the site supervisor will get a notification so you can actually stop them undertaking work and, you know, have the conversation and try and understand what's happening and prevent the spread to another project. So that's a couple of the ways in which HammerTech can help on the worker management and also the COVID side of things. Jason, are there particular instances from the Procore standpoint that's been helping general contractors navigate workforce management? And, you know, part B to that is also the COVID exposure on work sites.
Mm-hmm. So it depends on the modules that people were subscribed to. The field productivity section of Procore, some GCs actually are tracking to that level of who's on site and how that's flowing. So that definitely helps. Without that, there's a few different ways that obviously myself as a strategic development consultant comes in and I take a look at, okay, what are we actually trying to figure out? How do we need to ascertain that information? Where does it need to go? There's a few ways that you can kind of, like I said, squeeze that return on investment out of Procore that you've already purchased and figure out ways to get it to work. I mean, when COVID started back in early 2020 in Canada, there was job shutdowns, but for whatever reason, it was deemed essential construction versus non-essential construction. So commercial office tower construction was shut down, but multifamily residential high-rise was still going. Government's decision, not mine, but it happened. And the same problem happened. There was workers that were leaving these commercial office tower ones and they still wanted to work. So their company was then sending them to the residential high-rise towers. Exact same concrete formworking crew, from one job to another, no real regulations in place. So we kind of use daily log and correspondence as a way to uniquely identify who was on site during COVID. And then it was sort of up to the superintendent and the project managers on those projects to send reports out to the company if they got shut down, to say these were who was on our site from this date to this date, and then pass that around the company. So a little more monotonous than what HammerTech can provide here, which again just goes into how HammerTech can augment your Procore system.
Absolutely awesome, thank you. And I had, I remembered another piece while you were speaking, Jason. So HammerTech can also now track vaccination status. So an optional component, I know that it's being dealt with very differently by different businesses, depending in the world, sort of where you are in the world. That information can be, you can sort of set up very different authority requirements, so that information can be confidential just to a very select few people in your business, and also optional. So if a contractor doesn't want to provide it, you also have that, you know, option. We don't have to make that a mandatory requirement. So again, that's helping you reduce the risk on your projects, and also manage any rollout campaigns you may have, things like that. So yeah, last piece to add on that front. Lovely. So let me just do one last check. No more questions in the chat, and then in the Q&A, I think that's the last piece. So I think on that note, we'll say thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Georgia, for being such a gracious host. Jason, thanks a lot for joining us up from the Great White North.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And like I mentioned, anyone who's looking for consultant partners from the UK or Australia, feel free to reach out to me as well. I've got some partners out there that I can pass on their contact to you so that you guys get serviced as well. I would do it myself, but I can't work 24/7, that's for sure.
I don't know why you can't, but we'll think about it anyways. All right. All right, Jason, thanks again. Thank you, Georgia. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Appreciate the energy.